What's up everyone, welcome to the 5th tutorial in our Python language basics. Here we're going to focus on some operators and the corresponding operations. Just keep in mind we'll be focusing on the most commonly used ones. There are many more operators out there, but these are going to be the ones that we'll find in our day-to-day coding. So we'll start by covering what are operators in general. Then we'll take a look at arithmetic operators, assignment operators, comparison operators, and logical operators. There are also some other weird operators. We'll kind of group these into the others category. There are even further operators outside of this, which I find myself almost never using. Those are kind of like bitwise and binary operators, but more on that once we get there. Okay, so for starters, what are operators? What do they do for us from a programming standpoint? Well, operators enable us to perform various operations on variables. That makes sense, fairly intuitive. A few of the operators actually modify the original variable value, but most of them don't. Okay, so it's important to note that distinction, that some of the operators will change the original value. Okay, so if you have a variable, just some integer, okay, and I perform an operation, some of them will modify the original integer, some of them will actually just produce a new result, leaving the original variable untouched. Okay, very important to know what does and doesn't occur there. Now, operators can generally be strung together, but they always follow the order of operations and then from left to right. Generally speaking, even though it follows order of operations, it's probably good practice to put your operations in brackets if you want to kind of clearly communicate to anyone reading your code, I want this first, then this, and so on and so forth. Okay, so even if we do like a plus operator and add two numbers, we can add like 50 numbers if we really want, kind of string that all out. Okay, so the first category are going to be arithmetic operators. These are probably the most intuitive. These are going to be used usually for numerical calculations, although there are other uses. They can also be used to glue strings together. This is often called string concatenation. There are also built-in functions to help us to do this. Strings do have a lot of extra functionality associated with them, but generally speaking, this is just easier to do. They produce a new numerical or string result. They usually leave the original numbers untouched. Okay, and these are going to be our basic arithmetic operators. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The percent sign there is the modulus operator that essentially returns the remainder of a division. That double forward slash is the floor division operator, and it basically performs the division and discards any remainder. Okay, so kind of does the opposite of the modulus. And finally, we have the exponentiation operator, that double star right there. Next up, assignment operators. Assignment operators are used to assign values to variables. In fact, we've been using this repeatedly, maybe without even realizing it. These can also be used in combination with the arithmetic operators. Okay, and these are going to be, first of all, our equal sign. So we've seen that in use many times. It just takes a variable on the left and assigns a value on the right. But there are also these combinations. So any of the arithmetic operators can be combined with this assignment operator. Don't worry, I will explain exactly what the difference is between this and the arithmetic when we get to this in the code section. Next up, comparison operators. Comparison operators are used to compare two values. We've seen one example of that with the greater than, or yeah, I think we did the greater than comparison. These can be numerical, string, or even Boolean variables. So we can test equality between them. We can test to see if one is greater than or less than the other, and so on and so forth. So these will start off with our is equals. Note the double equals in a row. Okay, that's a comparison, not an assignment. Okay, we have the not equals. We have the greater than or equals to, and less than or equals to. Next up, logical operators. Logical operators are used to test additional conditions. Okay, so these are typically used on Booleans, and these are our not, or, an and. We're going to take a look at an example of not, but or an you know what, we'll probably take a look at an example of all of these, but we will see that these will be much more useful when talking about control flow. All right, so we'll briefly touch on these, but we'll dive a bit more into them in the control flow section, which is a few topics from now. Okay, and finally we have the other operators. So our first operator, the ternary operator, is the if-else operator. So this is a good way to kind of shorten up if statements. If we're going to use them, it basically tests some condition and provides an answer, or I guess actually in this case, it provides a value, and then it tests if something is equal to whatever, maybe greater than, true, false, etc., and then provides an alternative value. Now don't worry, I know that's kind of a bit confusing just hearing me talk about it. We may or may not see that in action, but probably closer to the conditional or control flow tutorials. We'll talk more about the ternary operator then. Okay, there's the identity operator, is or is not. These are used to test membership to a particular class. There's a membership in or not in. These are used to test whether something is in some kind of a collection type. And there are the bitwise operators. These are used to kind of do logical kind of comparisons. We can shift stuff left and right, like by certain numbers of bits. We can AND or XOR NOR stuff together. Don't worry, I know that's kind of confusing. I very, very rarely find myself using bitwise operators unless maybe I'm dealing with graphics, so we're not going to be covering those. In fact, for the most part, we won't be covering these other operators in these upcoming tutorials. I just figured I'd throw them out there just in case some of you say, well, actually, there are all these other operators. Why are we not including those? I just figured we're probably not going to go over too many examples because they're a bit beyond the scope of this course. Remember, this is really just a beginner's course, Intro to Python. Okay, so that is it for now. Those are the groups of operators we're going to be covering. In the next section, we'll be taking a look at some examples of those. We may split into two depending on how long it runs. And yeah, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.